this is where the magic of incentives come in. People often call Bitcoin the buyer of last resort, energy buyer of last resort, meaning you produce some energy, you sell it to customers, and there's a little extra. There's nothing to do with it. So Bitcoin miners co-locate and they buy the extra. Great. This article is all about Bitcoin energy buyers of first resort, meaning, okay, we're about to produce a net new energy asset, and it might take 5 years for the population to grow big enough to purchase that energy. Might take years to ship the energy, building high voltage transmission to bring it to the population center, et cetera. And in that short term, a lot of energy projects never get funded because there's that really long period of ROI. This is especially important in these developing countries who rely on the World Bank and IMF because no one wants to invest in those countries because it's so risky. Okay. Now, Bitcoin miners are actually stepping in as a type of capital formation, which says, okay, we're going to put we're going to harness some geothermal in Kenya. It's like 6 feet under the ground. They have hot energy coming up. They can just spread out and collect this energy and power the majority of the country. But huge capital expenditure. Okay, what if Bitcoin miners are on site from day one buying all that energy? Now all of a sudden the investment case looks a lot better. And so this essay is essentially arguing that Bitcoin miners are going to lead to a net new production of energy assets.
This is what Harry Suddock talks about. Harry Suddock we had on talked about this, and his example was more domestic. He was saying, you might need a hospital or a school near a town, but there isn't the justification to build out the energy infrastructure for that. Now with Bitcoin mining, you can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, great.
There's less risk in that investment. You can charge less energy for the customers because you have this captive buyer who's willing to take it all at a good price. And that's the whole point of the essay, is that little incentive. Energy now has a buyer, leads to more complex economic arrangements and human flourishing.
It's also what Austin Mitchell was talking about in Africa, saying they can now build out much bigger grids because they can have that buyer of first resort, and then that in turn makes the energy cheaper for everyone in that local vicinity. So they're actually reducing the energy price in Africa because of Bitcoin mining.
And those miners can pack up and leave whenever the end consumer population center builds out. The miners are squeezed out, pack up the machines, and go do it again. Why don't I explain what a pioneer species is, actually? This is probably a good time.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the bit I want to talk about, okay?
Okay. A pioneer species is a unique organism. It's mostly from ecology, which is like a type of biology where you're studying systems. How does energy, photons from the sun hit the earth? Plants are just solar panels catching photons. They could take carbon out of the air and they make complex molecules that, plant eaters eat, and then carnivores eat the plant eaters. And it's just a recycling of photons from the sun pretty much. And sort of studying how that works out in populations or in ecosystems. And so one of the organisms there is the pioneer species. And the famous case study is a volcanic island near Iceland. Okay, big volcano erupts, wipes out all life on an island. You just have an igneous rock floating in the middle of the ocean. Is that just going to be a rock forever, or will new life colonize that territory again, right? Enter the pioneer species. So it's a hardy organism, drought tolerant. It can travel on its own, and its role is to recolonize that. And so a typical example would be a lichen, which is a symbiosis between a fungus and a plant. They work together. They land on that rock. The fungus literally digests the rock with chemistry, liberates all the molecules needed, and then the plant collects energy from the sun. Those two trade, and over time, you convert a rock into soil. And as you have more soil, you can attract some more hardy plants, and then those plants continue that process, and then you have trees, and then all the animals come back, and then you have a peak ecosystem. That process is called succession. Okay, now
that's amazing.
It is amazing.
That first bit, the creation of the soil.
Bingo.
That's insane.
It is insane. And now let's tie it to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin miners are those pioneer species. So they're looking around for ecosystems with untapped energy assets. Let's do the dams, or the rivers in the mountainous region in DRC, right? Untapped energy lives there, but it can't be harnessed now because no one has the capital to invest. Now the miners pair up with the people on site. They go colonize that energy asset. And now all of a sudden you're producing more energy, you sell it to the local community, and succession occurs again. Now you have cheap energy. Maybe industry wants to come there and buy that cheap energy. If there's industry, then you need jobs, you need housing, you need roads, you need hospitals. And from that one little incentive, it grows out and it becomes a flourishing human civilization. Then the miners get squeezed out. They go find a new energy asset to bootstrap prosperity somewhere else, and the cycle repeats. So I view Bitcoin miners as little Citadel seeds. I know you don't like the Citadel meme, but think of it as little seeds that plant around the world, and they just produce human flourishing.
Well, so when I first read it, I turned around to Danny. I said, "This sounds a little bit more like economic colonialism. We're going in there and we're stealing the energy, and we're creating the Bitcoin, and we're sending the money back to wherever we come from." But now you've explained it. Now I understand it. By the way, how do you come up with this shit? Is this when you're on like mushrooms or something?
Usually not. No. I like ideas.
Usually, yeah. Not always.
Leave it open ended. I have a reputation to massage.
The thing that I love is even if it's done with the most selfish intention, the outcome is probably a positive in that sense. Like, so yeah. I really like that.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is we don't have to go there and do this. The incentive's there for people locally to do it themselves. And that's way better. Like taking pig shit in Mexico, digesting it and mining Bitcoin, that didn't require a Western company to come extract resources, right? That was all done locally. And I think that's where the magic comes. You don't need outside capital because the economic terms are now a lot better. To be fair though, there will be a lot of people coming in to do that. But to Danny's point, doesn't matter. Just like Bukele. He's got a lot of faults, but if he unleashes Bitcoin in his country and it takes off, it doesn't matter what he does because he just accidentally empowered all his people. And a dictator is less potent in that type of environment.
Everything is good for Bitcoin. Everything is good for Bitcoin. I really like the fact that you've identified this is actually a progressive agenda, or it should be.
It absolutely is.
A real progressive, not a fake progressive.
Correct. Yeah, the progressives want to say solar panels and wind everywhere you go. And that's cute and that's nice from New York City with your latte. But that does not reflect reality on the ground. People want to eat, they want shelter, they want the basics. And those basics come from low-cost forms of energy. And the reality is that means fossil fuels today. And with this sort of pioneer species thing, you can be on this team if you're a progressive, even if you don't agree with fossil fuels, because it's spreading energy, and spreading energy is the single best way you can raise people out of poverty. Jordan Peterson says, make them rich. That's absolutely true. But energy is the master commodity. If you want to be rich, you need cheap energy because everything is downstream from energy. And so, yeah, the biggest humanitarian issue in the world is make people rich. How to do that? Give them cheap energy.
Well, we're making people poor in the UK by giving them expensive energy. We are literally making people poor. We are, as I said, we've got people who cannot heat their homes. We hit a point where they were discussing £5,500 a year for your energy bills. Yeah, £5,500 a year.
Insane.
And they've had to subsidize that. They've had to put a cap in. I think the cap's £2,500. Now, if you earn £12,000 a year, that's nearly 50% of your. I mean, it's not possible. So people are not heating their homes. They're cold. They can't feed. Like
that's in the UK.
Yes, in the UK, we're pushing people into poverty. But I mean, a lot of this has helped me identify the real world issues of money printing in the UK. One of the things I've recognized is that whilst UK GDP is, over the last 2 decades is up, the life people are living, the separation between the wealth gap is leading to real kind of disastrous consequences. We've got ghettos. We've got ghettos, being created in towns that used to be towns that flourished. I've got a film. We've got to watch that. I've got this film coming out about inflation. I went to this place called Harlow, and they had it's a building called Terminus House, and they had a problem with housing, social housing. So they've turned this old office block into social housing. It's a fucking favela in the middle of the UK, and it's a center of various social issues. You're putting single parents in there, single mothers in there with drug dealers and drug addicts and criminals, and it's to me, it's what really identified these issues. But we're now squeezing the middle class out in the UK. We've not only squeezed the poor, we're now squeezing the middle class out. We've got people who are closing their businesses because they went from having a cafe whose energy bill would have been £5,000 a year to 50,000. It's not like this is that place. This is a UK.
I'm pretty sure they photoshopped that sunny sky.
Yeah, I think they have. Well, it's not that sunny. I mean, I went there, right? I went there. It's awful.
Reminds me of Soviet housing.
Yeah,
like that.
It is like that,
Yeah.
and it's because we've squeezed people so much in the UK. But yeah, so you've got cafes who've got their energy bills going from 5,000 a year to 50,000, and it's not like, oh, how do we? What can we change? Can we run? No, we just can't run our business. We just close our business down. That
Can't print energy.
You cannot print energy, and that has been another eye opener. That's one of the problems of doing this job. Is like you learn in public.
Yeah,
you're sitting down with somebody and they're telling you something, you're like, holy shit, and then you have to go on away and you've got to process this.
How about Germany? It's it's one of the biggest manufacturing hubs in the world, certainly for Europe. 100, 200, 300-year-old companies are going bankrupt because the economic conditions today are too harsh. Yep. Imagine what they survived in 200 years.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like most people around the world are even aware of this at this point. And that's shocking. It's very real, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. Lynn Alden does a good job explaining this, but it takes a long time to get energy assets turned on.
It's like 10 to 15 years.
Well, maybe for like a new nuclear facility. It can be a lot quicker.
Nuclear could be longer. I think she told me she thinks we're going to have a decade to recover from the lack of investment in energy.
I agree with that. Yeah, but a single energy asset can come online a bit quicker than that. But not at scale, not around the world, doesn't solve the problem anytime soon.
Well, they end up just recommissioning coal plants, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's been no new nuclear plants for how long? Although I think they've just commissioned 2 now in the UK to be built, which I don't know how long they'll take.
There's one that's meant to be finished in, I think, 27, maybe.
Okay.
We deserve it, honestly. In Alberta, Canada, tons of oil under the ground. What do? Disincentivize drilling locally, and then they just push all the energy production and good production, industrial stuff over to China. And then what do? They import all the exact same goods. China has less stringent regulations, and they had to ship things over on a boat to bring it back to the people to buy it. And then they pat themselves on the back and they win awards because they reduced emissions.
Or complain that China is building, whatever, is it 1,000 now coal plants?
There's 1,000 that are currently operational, just over 1,000.
But they're planning to build 50.
Build
50 yeah, of course. They've got to meet the demand of the production to give us Westerners what we want. One of the trickiest things with this, I find, and trying to relay these messages when I get back home, I'm always trying to be very careful how I do it, because as soon as you're classed a right-wing conspiracy theorist, you're immediately out of the conversation. You're considered a psycho and a nutter. And I'm always trying to think or trying to find ways to I think that's why people think I'm a bit of a cuck, because I'm always trying to relay these messages into a way that people can digest them.
Yeah, you're good at that.
But it's hard. It's a tough job to do. It's trying to say, it's trying to get people to understand, look, this is not a conspiracy. This is real. These are the real world impacts. Let's take some time to understand it. And it's really hard.
It's really hard. I think my favorite line on this one is explaining how hard it is Bitcoin mining is everything you don't understand about energy combined with everything you don't understand about Bitcoin. Right? It's by far the hardest. And energy itself might be a deeper rabbit hole than Bitcoin. And normal people don't have time to study this stuff. And most people fall in line with the consensus narrative, which is that we need to stop fossil fuels because the planet's about to break. Young people are diagnosed with climate anxiety now. That's a new disorder that young people have. One of the servers at our meetup was telling me about this. And I was like, hold on, explain that to me.
That might be an American thing.
It might be.
Yeah.
But essentially, she said, all my friends are worried about the future, and we all are, we're just thinking short term, and we think the boomers sold out the future and we're screwed. And that's certainly not true. And it's not a way to live. Young people need to be hopeful and optimistic about the future. We need to think long term. And when you start to realize that, it's not surprising why young people are so nihilistic today, why culture erodes. There's nothing to live for. There's nothing to fight for. And there's where Michael Saylor goes all in on Bitcoin is hope. And I wholeheartedly agree. You see a bunch of people with an optimistic view of the future, and they mean it, and they get together and they're positive, and you can tell, and there's a plan, and humans instinctively want to be a part of something larger than ourselves. And we can't get around that. And this is a really good thing to attach ourselves to. And I think everyone here agrees it provides great meaning and purpose. And I think it's morally right and good.